Okay. Okay, we're approximately 1/3 into the page Samach Daled. There are two lines that begins with kuli, and we are on the second of these two lines.
I think the first one.
What?
I think we're on the first one. Kuli. I think we start with Hare.
We could. You said it. All right. So we're saying that even Hamshocha Atzmus, Plinis and Atzmus, there are different madreges in that itself. In other words, the difference between the madreges is not that one is the etzem and the other is a ha'ora, or such other natural differences. They are both etzem, and yet there is a difference there is a difference between them. Like the difference in the neshamis, like we explained. Neshamis, all neshamis now, and all neshamis now, equal with the neshamis osid, they're all inyan atzmi. And yet there's a big difference in tvosim begashmis. Let us try and somehow identify the term atzmi, Luim atzmi. There is a ready illustration of the concept. And that is in light. When you have sunlight, so even though the sunlight illuminates the world, it does not become nitfas, meaning to say that if the light shines upon pure gold, or it shines upon dirt, the light is not affected. It remains exactly the same. Which means it's not nitfas. It doesn't relate to the area that it illuminates. How come? It's touching it. The answer is that it always remains connected to its source. In other words, as we always say, that the union of light, sunlight, is not the light, it is the sun. And it remains always connected to the sun. It's always representative of the sun, not of light. This is how it is possible that it should be light, and it should touch all the gashmis, whatever it's touching, pure and impure, and remain perfectly pure in and itself. And the reason for that is that it is what's called, I always mention that the sun has this element that it's etzem behiri. The union that it is etzem behiri is not, requires real insight. There is a difference between candlelight, as the candlelight hits an object, and sunlight. And within sunlight itself, there's a difference whether it is, like we always say, an emanation of its energy, or this is light, pure light coming from the sun, because the sun is an etzem behir. It's a principle that we discuss many times, and as many times as you discuss it, it remains something that needs to be further discussed and further understood.
What's the exact meaning of the word behiri? What's the exact meaning?
Behiri, bright.
Right.
The principle of the sun being etzem behiri is to be understood as the fact that when the sun rises, it becomes light, is not as meets the eye, that there is an emanation of light, of energy coming from the sun and journeying over millions of miles and hitting the earth, but rather a different concept completely. And that is that because the sun is an etzem behiri, meaning it is light in essence, not a manufactured light, but it is light in essence, which means light in essence means that it cannot tolerate, it cannot join darkness. It completely eliminates and transforms darkness. Not by being mislavish, by working with it, but eliminating it, because it is an etzem. The whole concept of etzem we'll be discussing all the time, but I'd like that we should think for the moment directly. It is not a manufactured light. It is not light that comes as a result of some kind of activity. It is light made by God to be light, period. It represents a godly will that it should be light, that it should be light. There's nothing natural about it. And therefore, because of this essential truth of the sun, wherever the sun comes, it automatically transforms into that area into light, not by actively pursuing it and actively working with it, but an etzem transforms automatically. The motion for this, from this Indian of the etzem transforming automatically, I think to us is the best that I've seen, that really brings it home, is like human ownership of property. And we said yesterday, we said many times, the human being has an etzem presence in the world. His presence in the world is not by virtue of his effort to be here and fighting for his right. It is a God-given presence, right. And I'm going to step off a step further, that we should have a real grasp of it. We have to understand, the whole world, after creation, remains in God's domain. It's like coming to, being invited to somebody's simcha, somebody's home. Even though you're in that home and you occupy space, and you live your own presence, but the entire domain is, you're there by virtue of this, the host's consent. your presence there is defined by the extent to which the host wants you to be there. And there are different levels. There are those levels where the host tolerates your presence. There are levels where the host allows you to be and welcomes you to be, and there are levels where the host wants you to be. It says, you better be here because without you, I have no party. These are all different ways, and it's all representative of the host's effect, and the host's bestowing of his presence upon all the guests. The real guest is the one who was invited by the host and he said, you must be here. The human being in the world is a huge world with all kinds of creatures. And they all are tolerated, all have their place. Some are merely tolerated, some have a purpose and so forth. But ultimately, who is the real guest for whom the whole world has been created? It is the human being. This is what I mean by etzem. He has an essential presence by virtue of what the Creator has had given him. The world remains in the domain of the Creator. We're all his guests, along with whatever else there are creeps around. So the human being has it's called an atzmi presence. This is what a human being is, an atzmi. Therefore, when it comes, as you said, to property ownership, everybody always comes back and says, well, the lion also has his turf. Yes, the lion has his turf, and the lion fights for his turf. And the minute he looks away, it evaporates. He loses it. The human being, because of his etzem presence, etzem right of being here, therefore, he simply says, this is mine, and it's his. Period. If it's done up the rules of Torah, it's his. He buys a piece of property that's tens of miles across. There's a huge area. Does he have to visit each area in order that it should be his? Not at all. It's his automatically because he's an etzem, and his ownership of property is due to these atzmos. To the extent, he said, it's nice to elaborate. I don't want to spend time, but to reflect, you can acquire a piece of land by many different ways. There's one very interesting way to acquire a piece of land. It's called Sadna Diara Chadhu. You buy a piece of land in South Africa. And you buy a piece of land from the same person in America. You go and you make a chazaka in the land in America, and you automatically acquire the land in South Africa. That's the halacha. This is illustrative of the principle that he's saying. Translated on the sun. The sun illuminates not by virtue of its effort to illuminate. It illuminates by virtue of its presence. The sun's presence, there cannot be darkness. Period. by God they decree that the sun should illuminate, and therefore it cannot be any other way. This is what's called etzem. This etzem, the effect of this etzem is that it is always related to and always drawn back to from the source. No matter how far the sun's effect is, it is not the light of the sun, the ray of the sun, it is the sun itself. This is the pshat that it's Ayin from Pnimi v'Yatzmi. And that Otzmi does not change because it always remains connected to the source. Now we are saying, and this is what Neshamas are. Neshamas are, pardon me, representative, representatives. Neshamas function as a result of the presence of their Creator. Not on their own. This is what says Neshamas are Elokus Mamash. Nevertheless, there's a difference. And now we can, from the Mishalim that we have, we can readily see the difference. For example, we're saying the sun illuminates automatically. Yet, there is the element where the sun is mislavish in the gashmis of the world, because it actually takes time for the ray of the sun, for the light of the sun to reach and to illuminate the earth. Despite the fact that it's an atzmi. Because when it illuminates the earth, it illuminates it b'hislapshus, meaning it does not nullify the darkness of the earth, it combines with it, it illuminates it. Because it does not nullify on a fundamental level, that's why it works through along with the nature and the requirements of the world. That's what is slapshus. And this is the difference between the tzaddikim, the various neshamas, for example. There are neshamas that are slapshus in the world, even though they be slapshus, they do everything that they need to do, but they do it with recognizing and combining with more of the requirements. The Alter Rebbe, it says, the Alter Rebbe never had to labor to understand Ayin in Torah. Tzemach Tzedek also, it says a similar thing. And Tzemach Tzedek was actually bemoaning this fact, because he's lacking the benefit and the schus of laboring in Torah. Why didn't he have? Well, it's made that he didn't have to labor in Torah, because, in simple terms, his whole approach of the world was from a Torah perspective to begin with, not from a worldly perspective. Then you have to transform it to a Torah perspective. It's from a Torah perspective to begin with, from the solar perspective. So there we have the difference. In our Mishalim, I might as well finish this. When we talked about the sun, so we said that the effect of the sun is on different levels. the light, Nivra B'Yem Rishon, the light was created in the first day of creation. So Yem Elokim Hi Oir V'Hi Oir. There was light, no illuminated, there was light, which is a godly light, a godly decree that it should be light. That light clearly was not dependent on engaging the physical world. There was nothing to engage with. There was light. This is why it says that light, it was concealed. Why? Because that actually eliminates worldliness. It's in total contrast to world. So that's why it was concealed. Because that light is not, the nitwas was not nitwas in Gashmis. Then afterwards, as we mentioned many times, this light was concealed, but when the sun was created, this light was then incorporated and given, so to speak, become part of the sunlight. In this Inyan that the light is part of the sunlight, we mentioned many times, there are two distinct effects of sunlight. One is, as we said before, when the light has to journey and hit an object, and then it is deflected from the object into your eye and you see it. And with that, in that respect, the human eye sees it, the animal sees it, and a camera can see it. Then there is another aspect in this sunlight. That is, like the sun transforms the world not into light but into day. Makes a distinction between day and night. And we mentioned many times that day and night are not light and darkness. Light and darkness are all functional aspects. Day and night are not functional. Day and night are nouns, are realities in and of themselves. So there is a certain aspect and effect of the sun that it makes day, which means it actually day and night are totally separate. It's not a little bit day and a little bit night. It's day or night. This is kind of the effect of the etzem of the sun, not the functional aspect of the etzem of the sun. Sun rose, therefore it's day. And as long as the sun is up, it's day. The sun sets, it becomes night. Even though there may be some light, but that light is a reflected light. Day and night are very categorically separate. This is the pshat in from the etzem. Shochas or atzmus. Shochas or atzmus means that it mamshich the source itself. The etzem. Not a function around it. And this within Hamshachas or Atzmus, there are different madregas. This is why there are different madregas in the shamas. That in the shamas that they're still Atzmi. Nevertheless, when they come in the world, they can relate to the world. As a result of that, it's possible for them to misinterpret things in the world and be drawn to things in the world other than for their mission. Okay, so now let's see inside a little bit. Okay, the top kuli. Rei, thus we see shegam bebchinas hamshocher ho'atzmis. That even in the aspect of hamshocher ho'atzmis, that means in mamshech the etzem itself, yesh hilug. There's a difference. Beis madrega hamshocher hi. In what madrega the hamshocher is. In other words, from the etzem itself, in what madrega of the etzem the hamshocha comes from. Like if it's Madrege from Atzilus or Madrege from Bria and so forth.
Like in the previous classes, you were always in previous classes you were always you always use the term perceived, not where about when you're talking about the etzem, the different in Madrigas was depending. You were saying that it depends on where it is perceived, and now it sounds like you're saying that it's where it originates from. It's a different thing. Sounds like same thing.
Yeah.
No, because I thought that it means that the etzem is always the same.
The etzem itself, yes, but there is different madrigas from which the hamshach of the etzem can be drawn. In other words, there is, in a very drastic contrast, there's the etzem the way it is unto itself, and the etzem the way the etzem wants to bestow its presence upon the world. That's a very different madriga completely. Like we say all the time, Odom shein Beis in the Odom. So when he has a Beis, he becomes an Odom. Before he had a Beis, he was also Odom, but he was not Odom in the world. It's a different level. If he were not an Odom before, then he couldn't become an Odom by buying a house. But in Odom, he's not an Odom in the world. He does not have an Odom presence in the world. It's a completely different thing. If a dog has a house, it doesn't become an Odom. That is, V'im Cain, okay, further down. Cain, and therefore, Yichud Pnimi Dezum, and therefore it follows. Now we can understand that Yichud Pnimi of Zum. This is in order to understand the difference between Yichud Pnimi Dezum and Yichud Chitzoni, so to speak. Yichud Chitzoni of Avo. And we're saying Yichud Chitzoni of the Avo is higher than Yichud Pnimi Dezum. Because Yichud Pnimi of Zun Hagam Shezehu B'Bchinas Hashpo Atzmius, although that this has the aspect of Hashpo Atzmius, the Atzmus Ein Soiv of Atzmus Ein Soiv, Mikol Mokoim, but still Arei Ze Kimahus B'Chinas Zun. It has the mahus, it has the presence, and the level of B'chinas, even though it's a hashpah atzmus, which means it has an element of midas and so forth. Even though it's a hashpah of atzmus. V'al kain. And therefore, Hanashikin, Hashpov and Nishikin, Agam Shuhu Haora. Although that Nishikin is only a Haora, which means it's not Hashpov Atzmis. It's not Hashpov Atzmus itself. It's only Haora Avol, but Liyoish Zeme Avol, being that this is from Avaim, which means it's from Chochma and Bina, Yesh Yisroin Behaora Zu. There is a supremacy in this Haora, Lagabe Bechinas Hamhus Zu, relative to the union of the Mahus of Zu. about 2 minutes, I just want to interject there. You see, we discussed this Indian somewhat when it was first introduced in the previous page. The difference between the way Atzmus is represented in Avo, in Chochmah and Bina, in Ha'ora of Chochmah and Bina, and the way Atzmus is represented in the Mehus of Zohar Malchus. Like we said before, in the and when we talked about the Amshochas of Atzmos, we said that you have the host and then you have guest. There are different levels in which the host relates to his guest. There are guests that he's being best friends, and he rejoices in seeing them. And he values their company. All kinds of different things. These are all things that have a definitive presence. There's an actual give and take between the host and the guest. Then there is, like we said, a completely different level, where the host says, without the presence of this person, I'm not present. There is not a tangible interaction between them. So even though there is not a tangible interaction, there is not a real Mahus presence. But it goes to such depth in the host and in the guest, where of an element that cannot be contained in a tangible manner. It is the Esim itself. There is that which is Hamshocha from the Etzem, and there's the Etzem itself. Like we said many times again, you have to be careful. The sun does not only give light. The Torah refers to the sun, Limshol b'yom ha'layla. Limshol. It rules the day and night. Which means it is not merely by its effect. As a matter of fact, as I pointed out, the whole union of bringing light is of a secondary level. Rashi points out, it's a secondary level. He rules the day and night. This is what day and night is all about. The presence of the sun, not the effect of the sun, but the presence of the sun. That does not have a tangible means of transmission. There is not a mahus, but there is the intent, like I said the other day when we first saw the kavanah. That intent reaches in and represents the essential element of the essence itself. that cannot be separated from the essence. It's the presence of the essence itself. This is the union from Avo, from Chochmah. Just one more word, it's late, but they speak always of sight. And sight is a phenomenal thing like Chochmah. And the phenomenal thing of sight is, with sight, you actually see the reality itself. Not what you can make of it, what you can understand, but how you can relate to it. Reality itself. How come? What reality do you see? You see the same physical world. Not at all. If it were the similar physical world, it would take time to interrelate. And to see across miles and miles, it would take time. You see the physical, you see the reality from which it comes. The godly will that it should be. This is why sight is so compelling. Much more compelling in its reality than even touch. Because you see it from a reality perspective. So you don't even see the physical, you see that where the physical is coming from. And you don't see it to its physical presence. The minute a child is born, he knows there is a real world. Nothing to do with his experience. All right, we have to stop here.
To remain on this call, press 1.